Hi and welcome back. So good to have you with us on this continuing, ever-deepening, meditative, guided journey into Source Life. And in this encounter, we're entering the 22nd consecutive meditation. And these are not separate segments, but we aim to have a constant continuum flow. Because meditative thinking, meditative speaking, the guided meditation is entering into Source. Leaving the spaces that we live where we're separated from the Source, desourced, to cross with our minds and our hearts and our being into Source Life. And that's our journey into Source Life. And at the end of our prior meditation, the 21st meditation, we began to see, as we go deeper and deeper into the missing source science that's opening up for us. But when we get the code, the access to Source, the code of Source, we open up a deeper vision, a deeper space, a global vision that we didn't have before. Unum Vision. We could see unities and connectivities because now we're in the matrix of the source code. And we're in our meditative guided meditation, we're trying to take a deeper look at our everyday life. To step back from what we're calling the motherboard or the matrix, the I-it to an I-thou matrix, where we can feel and see and be one with the connectivity of the fractal flow of deep reality, of being. So that's deep ontology, and we're seeing that when we're in deep ontology, the missing science of being that has been quested for millennia by our greatest geniuses through and scriptures and enlightenment is to get to the source science of what is first, which is infinite, and therefore infinitely connected in interflow. And so for us to flow, we can't use a chop-chop technology that is adolescent and premature, but we must rise to a meditative, integral, holistic, Unum vision power of global awareness to be one and flow in the fractal space of connectivity. And that's the call of all our great traditions. And so we're in the midst of that, and at the end of the last, we're going deeper into dysfunctions. And in terms of this Unum science, Unum means infinite unity, where we can now experience a connectivity in a deeper experiential space. It's a deeper empirical science. It expands science from in the box of information that we have been laboring under for millennia into a deeper encounter with reality, a deeper form of science, first science, source science, a queen of science, which is first philosophy or wisdom or enlightenment. And what would if we could go into the space of enlightenment, and we are all entitled to go there, and that's our journey into Source. When we open up the Source lens, the I am space, the awareing space, the integral, rational awareness, we can see everyday life in a deeper light, a deeper diagnosis, and we can see what our great geniuses saw, which is people are suffering. There's dysfunction. And what's remarkable and stunning in what we're seeing medically in ontology, ontological medicine, source medicine, is medical ontology. So we're suggesting that's a deeper, missing scientific diagnostic. And what we can see in our human condition, which is laboring under a motherboard, a matrix, for centuries of information, which is great, but it's not going far enough and deep enough as our great teachers were urging us to make a crossing from desource to source life. And what would it look like if we enter source intelligence, source vision, Unum Vision, to look at our broken, desourced life? And that's really where we left off. That when we step back and go into Unum science, medical ontology, and look at our everyday human condition, laboring and living under a deeply implanted matrix that we are not yet aware of sufficiently. And our great teachers were trying to name it and call it out and bring it to our attention so we can make the crossing to a deeper, more healthful space of well-being, from ill-being to well-being. And we've been looking at what is ill-being? What are ontological symptoms that we humans are suffering when we're cut off from being? That was the main point of our great teachings, that if we're desourced, we're cut off from being, and if we're cut off from being, we're broken and we have ill-being. And if our being is ill, we're going to feel it in every aspect of our lives, and all of our culture can be ill culture. So in our hologram that we've been using. And I'm going to turn to a fresh page to just put on some fresh markers in a moment, but I want to have a continuity from one guided meditation to the other, because our 3,000-year hologram, I'm suggesting that this image that we're seeing, a meditative image that we've been using to go deeper and deeper and to have it imprint so we can't forget it, is that we're always in the infinite space. The infinite space is the fundamental field. This is the fundamental field, the source field. And it surrounds every possible, every breath, every grain of sand, every experience, every phenomenon, everything that is in this infinite space of the logosphere, the logosophia. And all of our great scriptures and enlightenment teachers have been giving names for this fundamental field. It's all around us. Even though we can live in a technology that cuts us off from it, it's here. It's here and it's here. So let's go deeper now and try to take a deeper look at, say, the various kinds of ailments from being desourced. Ontological illness. Ontological, again, is a being. If we're broken from our being, ontos is being, and ontology is the science of being, and that's a missing deep science of being that we've been questing for millennia. And to get the I am code, which is what has been called for, we can access this matrix, the double bracket matrix, and live in this space. The double bracket space. To make a crossing from here, this is desourced here, our cultures are here, using this technology, which cuts us off from direct, deeper access, even though it's here too. The infinite is here. The infinite is everywhere. It's here and it's here. This is open, intimate, direct access, free range life in the I-thou space, where the I is infinitely interconnected with everything else around it. The environment, other people, other religions, other worlds, others at every level, the self and the other, the works of art, the music, whatever we experience in this space, I-thou, we are interconnected with it in the Unum Pluribus space. So Unum Pluribus is that the vast diversity of the universe is still Unum infinitely connected, and hence everything is interflow because of the infinite unified Unum force. And if we're de-Unum, if we're desourced, we're broken into pieces. And the technology that dominates the human condition, we're saying in this hologram, think of this as a 3,000-year hologram. Not just information here, it's not just here, it's a hologram, a deeper space of Unum science is showing that we're always in the infinite space, that we can cross into the matrix here, which is our journey to cross from this matrix, which is a motherboard, which we're saying can be a smotherboard and cut us off from deeper access to reality, to being. And this is where we rise to a higher calculus or logistic or logic or mind operating process, a matrix, a code, source code, where we are experiencing the flow. So, as when an athlete's in the zone and she's one with the field and the runner is the running, she is feeling the double bracket space. When the team is clicking, the soccer team is clicking together suddenly by some alchemy, and and the right wing and the center forward, left wing are somehow clicking with the entire field, with the game. We are the game. So there's an inversion from, in this space where we usually live, the ego is first, I am first, my culture is first, my lens is first, my language, my narrative is first. And we live from that orientation, I am first. When we cross into this, source is first. So we saw that yoga is, we put ourselves and our culture and our narrative and our identity first here in this space. That comes with the territory. The mind operating culture, code, meme, matrix, whatever name we use for that, it's really shaping our cultural life here. In the screen, where everything appears to us, our feelings, our inner feelings, our outer experience, all going on here, all of our different worlds and cultures are being developed alternatively in this space. And what we're looking at the end of last meditation is that our great teachers who are speaking and urging us to move and upscript, not from this matrix, but to the higher integral matrix of integral science, of the Unum force, the Unum meaning You have to flow with the Unum force. So I'm just using it in a way that it's all around us. It's always here. The Unum is not just here, but not here. It's here too, but somehow we chop it up with our technology. That's what our great teachers saw. So when we said that Moses and Buddha and Krishna and Lao Tzu and Socrates and Mohammed are examples of medical ontologists, they're saying this is not right. This is not healthful being. And we have to migrate into source, into the Word of God, into the Word of Source, into the Buddha space, into the Christ space, into the Allah space, in order to come to health and to leave a dysfunctional form of life behind. These are great medical ontologists. And Unum power allows us to see the links between them. So that when Jesus is speaking, I am the way, the truth, and the life, as a logos, we can use the word logosophia for this as a name for this field. But whether it's Yahweh or Allah or Brahman or Om or Buddha nature, whatever name we use for this field, or whatever narrative we're using in source in the source field, the truth force here is not because the Buddha says it. The Four Noble Truths of Enlightenment of Buddha are not true because Buddha said it. It's true because it's source science. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, it's not true because Jesus said it. It's true because he's the logos in the flesh, the code, the covenant, alive in the flesh, living words, embodied in the human. That's Buddha. That's Jesus. Moses brings the law from the burning bush to the people. Muhammad is in touch with Allah and bringing through in the Quran the teachings to get us to surrender to Allah, for example. These are medical ontologists. They're attempting to help us diagnose our human condition as broken in some profound way and therefore dysfunctional as a whole. Our whole cultural life is compromised if we're desourced, we don't have the healing medicine of Unum links, the Unum flow of being in the zone of being. And so if we're disconnected, we're going to feel it. And because the infinite force is always pulling on us, because our journey as humans, as we grow and mature from this stage of technology, of using the word and mind and reason, it's not just when we diagnose mental illness. Mental illness, when we have in psychology, psychiatry, and we speak of mental illness, so a person has schizophrenic symptoms, a person have borderline personality, a person have bipolar disorder, whatever names we use for a medical mental illness, there's a deeper kind of mind illness. Let's call it mentation. Mentation is how do we use our mind. That's mentation. And our great teachers were seeing scientifically, in terms of source science, that if we're misusing our mind and not tapping the source, we're going to have ontological illness. And let's think of that as a new word. It's been always with us, but to be ontologically ill, if my being is ill because I'm cut off from reality, because to source is reality, source is the field, it's being. It's a fundamental word, language, it's reason. It's the light of reason. And if we're cut off from that, we're going to feel it in every moment of our lives. It's going to haunt us because the infinite force is the greatest force of the universe. It's everywhere, and it's pulling on every iota, every grain of... When Blake says there's infinity in a grain of sand and eternity in an hour, he's tuning into the source. So when Buddha speaks the noble truths, it's in the source science. When Jesus speaks from that field, I am the way, he is the double brackets. That's the code. The double bracket is the source code. The single bracket is the D-source matrix that we humans have been matured to and living in that space for millennia, but we don't know how to cross and let it go, call it out, because it's so deeply implanted, we've suggested, that we need to call it out, name it, call it out. So single brackets, strokes, are meant to help us see it, and therefore to trip it. To once we see it, we could deal with it medically, existentially, ontologically. And say, oh, I didn't realize that there was a matrix holding me captive. And I didn't realize we were captive. I thought we were free range. But now we see we were colonized by a matrix. A technology of using our mind by mentation. So let's use a deeper word than for malpractice. Mental malpractice leads to desourced illness, ontological pathologies and dysfunctions and breakdowns and life crises of all kind come from mentation malpractice. And in a way, to sum up our great wisdom and enlightenment of the planet, is if we are as we mind, if we use and are used by a matrix, a single bracket matrix, we're going to have a single bracket life. Because mentation makes and co-makes our culture, our world, our experience, our phenomena, everything about my life that I'm experiencing, my narrative, my story, my belief system, everything is going on right here. Under the sway of a technology of how to use the word and put them together to make meaning and to reason and to have judgment and cognition and belief systems and paradigms and theories and disciplines and sciences and arts all going on in this space. This is huge. So if we're going to enter source medical ontology, source science, unum science, where it's suggesting that when you're tapping being, reality, it's an infinite fractal unified field. And we need a fractal mind operating process. The double brackets is a unified, holistic, integral, fractal, logic, mind operating process. Yoga, Christ, Buddha, these all names are the ones who are innovating and helping us to cross into the integral calculus, where we experience the flow and we are one with the flow and one with each other and one with nature and one with the universe and one with everything in that space. So that's Unum unity here. So this is one matrix, the one where we have well-being, and this is ill-being when we're cut off. And so what we're looking at in this 20-second guided meditation is to go deeper into, could it be that all of our cultural life here, all of our experience, my individual life, my interpersonal life, my civic life in the political space, my politics, my economics, my religious life being practiced here, my educational life, my love life, my sex life, all my life is going on in this space under the smotherboard. And so whatever we encounter here, we're going to turn the page in a moment to clean this up. This might be too messy to really be understanding. But if you've been following us for the last 4, 5, 6 meditations, when we've been using this for the last 4 or 5, to just have constant focus on this hologram of 3,000 years to come to this point. I'm suggesting this is a new rendering of our human condition to see that we are here in our development and evolution. And we are encased and embedded within a mind-operating mentation practice that can cut us off from deeper access to being and reality and the primal word and myself. Myself is here. So we saw earlier that every word in any language, whatever language we speak in, whatever culture we're in, whatever worldview, whatever belief system, whatever scientific discipline, whatever form of life we're in here, whatever narrative we're living here, narratives here, every word here, single bracket, can be taken to its double bracket meaning. That's a huge principle. That's source science. Every X is X. I is I. Time is time. Jesus is Jesus. Reason is reason. Mathematics is mathematics. Medical science, medical science. Symptoms, symptoms. Every word is upgraded to its deeper form. So we know it's a cardinal principle of medicine that unless we get the right diagnostic of the symptoms, unless we get the right diagnosis, we can't really heal it. That's huge. And these great teachers like Buddha and Krishna and Jesus and Socrates are trying to help us get the language of reason, of the deep source intelligence, to rightly diagnose our human condition and our ailments. When Buddha says to exist is to suffer, he meant to exist in the box, in this space. To exist is to suffer. Why? It's to be ill, because we're cut off from the Buddha space. And why is it? Because we're using a technology, an immature, adolescent, so to speak, technology of human development, cognitive development, that has a deep ignorance here. So ignorance here, we could have all the information, we could Google any information here, but we could still be in ontological ignorance. When Socrates said, I don't know, I don't have knowledge, but I know what we have in the culture around him is sophistry. It's not real knowledge. Why? Because you need the logos. Your knowledge here is not real deep knowledge. It's not sourced. It's not grounded in the source, in the logos, which is a code of the infinite rational space. And so the journey of knowledge is from knowledge here and information here, which becomes disinformation. As great as information is processed in, that's a mentation disorder. So we don't just want to go mental illness, we want to go mentation malpractice. If we're using a colonized mental operating system to make our worlds and our lives, and we don't even know, we haven't called it out, as great as it helps us to see, it also blinds us, and that causes an ignorance, a deep ontological ignorance. So when Socrates was saying, it was Socratic ignorance, Socrates is ignorance, it was wisdom. It's wisdom to see, to realize I'm ignorant. If you're here and you're having knowledge and you realize knowledge is not knowledge, and I don't have knowledge yet, but I know this is not it, that's a good first step. Or when Descartes in his meditations on first philosophy, Descartes was looking for first science. Meditations of First Philosophy is the title of his great classic work. He saw he could doubt everything here. That he, looking at his all experience and reviewing it and his culture and his religion and his mathematics and everything he had in his culture to that point and his belief system, he saw he could doubt it. Why? Because it wasn't grounded. That's when you come into the I am space. This is the I am. This is when you tap the zone, you tap the source, you tap reality directly. Words here are broken and they're word bits, like Lego bits, and this is logos, units. Words here are whole and integral, like time, spoken in the double bracket. Here is integral with everything else. Space is integral with everything. I am integral with everything else. You, integral. So I, you, integral. Every word is integral with the entire field. That's the Unum science. So it's very important to see that there's a deep science in Jesus as Christ, speaking the Christ, I am the way, the truth, and that's the truth. Why is it truth? Not only because Jesus said it, but because Jesus spoke as Logos in the flesh. He spoke scientifically. Christ science. When Buddha's noble truth, why are they true? Not because Buddha was enlightened, whatever that means. Enlightenment is deep. It's tapping the Logos, tapping the source of the light and getting the technology of speaking and being and living in that Dharma, the Buddha Dharma. And when you're there, the words are alive. The Buddha cannot be put in the box. You cannot find the Buddha speaking here, cannot be placed here. We cannot understand the noble truths here. So this is huge, what we're suggesting, is that mentation illness is a malpractice of the using of the mind and language and cognition and reason. And everything, if our reasoning here is desourced, if reason here is sourced, that's the Logos. That's awakened mind. Reason here is cut off from source. And it's going to suffer from the lack of the Unum unity and coherence. It's going to be discoherent. It's going to be alternative use of reason. It's not going to be grounded. Language here, the word here, in the beginning is the word. That's the infinite, the Christ word. Scripture is here. But if we come into our space, words are separate. They're broken. They're itemized. They're Lego blocks, so to speak, rather than Logos words. So Logos words are living, and to speak them, you've got to live them and embody them as Jesus was modeling. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. That's strange speaking. Buddha is speaking analogously. Krishna in the yoga, coaching Arjuna. Arjuna is here and broken down in a war, and he doesn't understand it's being caused by something that he doesn't understand. He's in a life crisis. He's suffering. Arjuna is suffering in a fratricidal war, and he drops his weapon. And Krishna, the voice here, shows him that why he's suffering. He's got to let go of this stage of monocentric, egocentric, desourced, pre-Om life to come into the Om space, the Om science. That's the technology of yoga. So why is the Bhagavad Gita or the yoga science true? Because it's tapping the Logos. This is huge to see, and these diverse great wisdom pioneers of opening source ontology and source medicine to get to the first, the fundamental foundations, the primal word, the original word, the Om, Christ, the Yahweh, the Allah, the Brahman, the Tao, across the planet. Our great visionaries were tapping into that. But there was a barrier of trying to, how do you translate that into the everyday language that is desourced? We went through that about 4 meditations ago. In number 15, when I said there's a great translation problem to get this language and this matrix to be understood here, and how do we get people living in this space, and broken and divided and broken words and broken reason and broken truth and broken meaning and broken experience, and phenomena are separate, and worlds and narratives and disciplines scattered. There's a Babel structure to the technology because it gives names and units to everything it touches, and they keep falling out into broken pieces. And we don't have the Unum resource here. The resource is all around us. It's here too, because this comes from the infinite source. It's both here and here, of course. But we can't tap it because of our technology. So that is a mentation illness. Mental illness is a mentation illness, and to be desourced is going to affect and infect every part of our lives. So what I wish to do in this meditation is to take a deeper look with Unum Vision into these fundamental aspects of culture, because what's amazing is that it's not just that we have a list of separate different symptoms here. It's not that, there are mental illness factors in psychology and psychiatry, or there are cultural breakdowns in racism and sexism and homophobia and ethnic cleansing and genocide and all forms of terrorism and violence going on here. It's not just that we can list all of these separate kinds of breakdowns, or that family life is not working, we're not in dialogue, we're in monologue, and we're slashing our kids with a technology that we don't even understand, and they're disheartened and in despair and disenchanted with life, and all of these existential kinds of feelings and crises that are going on. So much is going on at every level. So whether it's my personal life is in disarray, something is not working, I can feel it. We're feeling the call of the source on us. We're being called to rise to ourselves, to find ourselves. But when we're cut off from ourself, our deep self, our self here, this self here is on the way. It is a construct of our culture, of our narrative, of our code that we're using. It leads us to create a story of ourselves, and we're living this story here. And our teacher says, that's not your true self. It's being covered up. Your true self has to go here, to the I am. When you find your code, everyone has that code within her and needs to find the way to tap it. And you won't even know how to tap it if you don't even know there's a smother board that's holding us back. It's so deeply implanted. We have to call it out, see it, and realize there are great strategies for stepping away from the dominance and colonization of this smother board that cuts us off from ourselves. So naturally, if we're going to be cut off from ourselves, and we know it, it's a precognitive awareness. I know something is wrong. When we're cut off and desourced from being, from reality, from truth, from meaning, from authenticity, from life, from joie de vivre, joy of life, from nirvana, when we're cut off from that and it's calling us, it's haunting us every moment, and we're going to feel it. And if we don't have the tools to even recognize and articulate and name that, how many people would say, I'm living in a matrix that's a motherboard, and it's been cutting me off from myself, I've been colonized, and I thought I was free, but I'm not free. I get it now. I see what I need to do to come to healing, to heal myself, to make the great crossing from my life implanted here to my life opened up in the free-range freedom of well-being, of nirvana, of love, of compassion, of connectivity, of intimacy with God, with Source, with reality, however we view it. So the human medical predicament is that we're being all under the powerful call of the infinite force, calling us to come to be, to come to life. Our teachers, Jesus, come, those who believe in Christ, will be saved and be liberated. Why? To believe. Beliefs are here. I hope we see this now. that our life, our mental life is going on here. So my beliefs are thoughts that I affirm or deny. These are beliefs. And Jesus is not here. Single bracket Jesus is not Jesus, the Christ. Single bracket Moses or single bracket God is not God. Single bracket Buddha is not Buddha. Single bracket yoga is not yoga. So my single bracket self is not me. It's not I am. So when we're cut off from ourselves and from life and from flourishing and well-being, well-being is here. And when we're cut off from that and living here and in our beliefs and mental states and feelings and emotions and narratives and fears and our love life is here and your breakdowns are here, our marriage is here, our divorce is here, my politics is here, the political wars and battles and breakdowns and polar civic space is here. It's broken, it's polarized. The polar parties can't speak. Different religions are vying. Which is the true religion? Which is the true science? Which is the true... So all of this is going on here. And when we're then cut off from being, we're going to feel it in every moment of our lives. There's almost kind of a distress. To be de-sourced is to be de-stressed. Deep stress, mentation, sickness, illness, pathology, dysfunction, because we're cut off from ourselves, cut off from life, cut off from authentic being, cut off from reality. And we're going to feel it. And we're going to realize that at some point that we're living in a dark space. We're living in an eclipse. There's an eclipse. We're living in the cave, as Socrates and Plato would say in their allegory of a cave. We're living in a cave life. That's this space. This is caged, and this is free range. And when humans, we are coded with the Logos Sophia code. We're coded, all of us. All humans are coded. We're meant to be in the awakened, enlightened, flourishing, nirvanic, integral, blissful, healthful well-being. We're meant for that. And if we're not, we're going to feel it because we've got that code inside of us and it's blocked and we'll know it. We know it in a precognitive way. And with all of the information we can Google here, which is amazing technology, the information age is not just in the 20th century when we got more digital power to have more information. It's been going on for 3,000 years and more. Because information is giving the thoughts, the content, the belief, right, which has a paradigm. I have my lens and I'm giving my belief system here. And I have my ideology. This is a place of ideology. My stories, my narratives, my worldviews. My religion, my politics, are all ideologies. Ideology is a system of ideas, but under the sway of the D-source motherboard. All you can get there is ideology. And so that's the point I'm making about ignorance. We can have all the Google knowledge, we can Google all the information, but information is not knowledge. And if we don't see that, wow, we're in the box, that's the human condition. This is a hologram, a 3,000-year hologram that is seeking to call it out by naming the motherboard that's holding us in our information space. And all of our lives and cultures are going on here. And it's a highly dysfunctional space to be at every level. My personal life, my interpersonal life, my political life, my economic life, my religious life. Because religious life is calling us to come to source, to scripture, here. Enlightenment, here. Wisdom is calling us here. This is philosophia, to enter the wisdom of Sophia, Logos Sophia. So we're going to feel it in every breath and every moment. And this meditation is attempting to help us to see this because we've been blocked from seeing and getting this deeper Unum science diagnosis. And as I said a moment ago in this meditation, is that as a principle, a cardinal principle of medicine, medical science, that if you don't have the right diagnosis, you can't address the illness truly and to come to the source that's causing it. But our diagnoses here, the names that we have for our dysfunctions and pathologies and mental illness and psychological dysfunction and all of these cultural breakdowns, and here is not being diagnosed from a deeper Unum science lens. It's not being seen that, wait a minute, hold everything. What if there's a deeper smotherboard that we didn't see that's causing these effects? And we need to step back and call this out. What if all of my life is a desourced effect from being implanted in a technology of consciousness and language and reason and word and experience making and world making that I didn't understand? And it's desourcing me, and it's breaking things up and fragmenting and polarizing. So when I look around me, I experience polarization in myself, in my mental space, in my personal life, in my family life, in my relationship with others, in my love life, in the politics of my workplace and my profession, and in the politics at large of my civic space. And we witness all of the dysfunctional breakdowns, and we see sexism and racism and homophobia and all of these breakdowns and violence, abysmal violence going on. Why? Could it be this? Well, that's what our great teachers are suggesting. That there's almost an integral source illness. If you're living in this space, cut off from source, you're going to feel it, and there's going to be dysfunction. And we need to rename our symptoms from a deeper science, from the Unum source medical as medical ontological disorders, mentation malpractice. This has not been articulated. We needed the hologram of the human condition situated here and cut off, and the call of our great teachers to here. And this is, I would suggest, from the Unum science, the source science, a more accurate opening up, holographic rendering of our 3,000-year evolutionary journey to where we are now. Voila, here's the human condition in light of our great teachers and the science of the Unum Pluribus. And now we can look into the human condition here and all of our cultural lives and belief systems, and there's a lot of wiggle room here. This matrix affords us boundless alternative stories and narratives and belief systems and paradigms. And we can make paradigm shifts and new stories. Change your story, change your life. You hear that all the time. It's true. If I'm living a Newton story, I have a Newton world. If I'm living an Einstein story, an Einstein. If I'm having a Freud story, I have a Freud psychiatry. If I'm using Carl Jung, I have a Jung story. So when you change your lens within the space, we can change our lens. And we can have multiple lenses. A typical, say, just take from American culture, it might have multiple lenses. I'm a practicing Jew, and I really believe in the biblical view. I'm a practicing Christian or a Muslim, let's say. And I believe in the children of Abraham. I believe in the Bible, the biblical truth, and I have my truth here. As a religious person, in terms of living my scripture. But I'm a scientist, and I believe that it's not Genesis that's the origin of the universe, but it's a Big Bang that's the origin of the universe. And so those are two different lenses that I can have. And I can say that as a civic American, I'm trying to live in an open, ecumenical civic space where I keep my religion out of my politics, which is impossible, really, in this space. So we could separate our different ideologies and different lenses. In other words, I could be living in multiple worlds. The typical person could be living in multiple worlds with multiple lenses that she can dance and sit for, but I have multiple personalities. Because what's a fact in one worldview is not a fact in the other. So that facts here are not integral. What is a fact for one worldview is not a fact for the other. What makes sense for one world does not make sense for the other. And that's why this space can be such a devastating breakdown of Babel, where we can't talk to one another, when we have monologue. And that would be a medical symptom. The dysfunction of having broken words and worldviews and languages and worlds that are worlds apart and no basis to connect across them. Even we try to dialogue here. You can't dialogue here. Dialogue comes when we go dialogos. Dialogue doesn't mean two, it means taptologos. Get to the deep common space where all of our worlds arise. All worlds come from the logos, from the fundamental double bracket space. That's the source of all. The Unum all is source all. It's all worlds, all narratives, all belief systems, all theories, all disciplines, all art forms, all political ways of life. All ways of life are coming in terms of the deep space. So what we have to see is all our belief systems and mental states are here, and they're broken and not coherent. They don't have the Unum power. So I am in pieces. I have multiple identities. I have multiple ontological identities and multiple worldviews I'm living in. So it's not just I have one world. I could live in a complex space here that has many different perspectives and worldviews and narratives. And I'm living multiple narratives. And I don't have the tools to handle it with Unum power. And that causes suffering. Because if I'm in pieces, if I have multiple personalities, that's a kind of ontological schizophrenia of multiple personae in my different lenses that I'm living. For example, I'm just giving examples. So our beliefs and cultures and life proceeding here, and we're looking at it from a deeper scientific Unum science to see this is the human condition, and if you're any form of life within this space is going to be in some kind of malpractice. If you're desourced, you're going to be in pieces. You're going to be polarized in some deep way, broken from yourself here. You're going to be, yourself here is not yourself here. And if you're unselfed, if you're unsourced, and you have the implant within you, the double bracket code is awaiting and calling at every moment in your life, you're going to feel it, we're going to feel it. And we're going to try, and if you can't get it and can't name it and can't understand it, we're going to try and medicate it, we're going to try and fill the space. If myself, my story, my identity, my worldview, my belief system, whatever it is that I'm living, my identity, is cutting me off from my true identity, my double bracket identity, in being, in authentic being. If I'm inauthentic, if I'm disintegral, if I'm cut off from life, from truth, from being, from meaning, from goodness, from rightness, which is here, we're going to feel it, and we're going to try to medicate it. We're going to try and fill the void. We're going to try and misidentify our desire for, I want something to fill it. If you're living here and you're desiring something here to fill the void you're feeling, it's not going to work. Our great teachers knew that this is a despair. It's a bankrupt dead end. And we have to call it out. If we want well-being, we've got to see this, call it out, and migrate into rehabilitate our consciousness with the double bracket source code of being mindful in the moment and practicing I-aming. And that is what Zen, for example, is. Practice 24/7, heads up mindfulness. Remember who you are. Remember the infinite is always here. And we can be and are in touch with it. And remember that you're cut off. And when you remember that, memory here, I can remember my appointments, I can remember my story, I can remember my date of birth and my social security number. That's not memory, that's not mind. Mindfulness here. And when you're here, you remember. Because when you're dismembered, when you're cut off from your mind, awakened mind, you're dismembered and in pieces. And you're living a broken, dysfunctional, ontologically dysfunctional life. And to come to well-being, it's when you cross into the zone. So what we're seeking to do in this meditation is to really imprint on that and see, because everything turns on that. If we don't see that all life in the smotherboard, in the matrix of the single bracket, I-it information box of life, there's something dysfunctional implicitly in all of it. In my personal life, in my interpersonal life, in my culture, in my religious practice, in my political practice, in my scientific performance, in my educational life, in my raising my children, in my love life, my sex life, all my life, all my human relations, because relations here are not relations here. Relations here are the Unum continuum. That's all around us, but we cut them off. And so we make our relations. We synthesize our relations like putting Lego blocks together with the I-it rather than the I-thou when we tap the relational flow. And that love is a relation here. It's intimate interconnection with everything, with yourself and the other and the source. That's a love space. That's the ethics space. That's the reason space. That's the science space. That's cognition. So I'm juggling many themes here, but ignorance is not just ignorance of information. We can have all the information, but that's not speaking to ontological ignorance, is not seeing that you're living within this space and that the highest priority is to migrate into the zone, into the double bracket technology. And to be ignorant of that, to be living your life here, is not to know thyself. So ontological ignorance is what produces mentation disorder of all kinds for all of us living in the single bracket space. So what I'm seeking to do in this meditation is to give us a whole new, deeper way to look for Unum power, and not at piecemeal symptoms here and there. Oh, there's political issues over there, and there are religious issues over here, and there are intercultural issues here, and economic issues over there, and climate issues over there. No, they're all connected. And they're all traceable scientifically to one deep source. Being cut off from being is the main source of illness. Ontological disorders, ill-being. And we haven't really seen that. And as scientists in medicine, as healers, and there's so many beautiful, ingenious healers in our cultures, psychiatrists and psychotherapists and clinicians and MDs and researchers who are looking into the pharmaceutical and they're looking to the deeper causes of illness. It's brilliant, it's fantastic that we're getting it. And when we're looking at the symptoms here and we're trying to solve the medical problems here and diagnose it and treat the stress and what comes from stress and get the right diet to deal with these symptoms and get the right medication. You're dealing with your depression. You take some medication and it makes a difference to your brain and cognitive studies and all that's going on here. But who is stepping back and saying, wait a minute, could it be that there's a deeper story, scientifically, medically, that these symptoms are effects of this motherboard? Could it be that the depression we're feeling in our everyday life is a distress of being cut off from source? So I want to ask us a question. All healers, all life coaches who are trying to help self-help and to diagnose correctly, deeply, and to medicate it with all of our genius and gifts, and we are gifted, brilliant things are happening. Have we seen that a primary issue, if we're desourced from being, from ourself, from reality, from truth, from meaning, from reason, they're going to be symptoms of being desourced. And perhaps medically we should take a deeper look at our symptoms that we've been looking at in the box and say, wait a minute, what if I saw these symptoms now as more problematic than I thought? That my being is broken. Let's ask that question. How would we treat the symptoms that we're now seeing? So maybe our symptomology here, our brilliant science and diagnostic powers here in this space, using this motherboard here, may not be deep enough to see a whole deeper understanding of the symptomology from the double bracket science. That if we're desourced, and here, if I'm in depression, if I'm having suicidal thoughts, why? Because the lights are not working for me here. The lights are here. Meaning is here. Being enthralled with life, my joy of life is here. Your truth is here. The light of my mind is here. Meaning is here. But if I'm living here, I'm living in a cave space. And if I become aware of that this is not working. What I thought was meaningful is not, it's synthetic meaning. It's not source meaning. It's not meaningful. So meaning can be ill. My narrative can be broken off from source narrative. My narrative, my story can be broken. My identity can be cut off from true me. I'm not my true self. I want to become my best version of myself. We hear that a lot. I want to get the best version of myself. I want to change my story and do the yoga and do whatever the spiritual discipline is and what all of the great, beautiful, best-selling coaching books that are getting to say, this is how you get better. Check it out. Try this, try this, try this, try this. But it's not calling out this and saying, try this. So I'm trying to ask for all diagnosticians in diagnostic pathology, the logos of diagnosis, from being desourced. If we were to be sourced, as Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Moses, Socrates, Muhammad are calling us to be sourced in the light, in the well-being, what would our bodies be like? What would be our diet? What would food be like in the double bracket space? What would breathing be like if I lived there? Would I get overstressed? Would I get overstressed? Not overstressed, but leave stress behind? Could it be that ontological stress is being caused by this condition that is dismal from a source medical point of view? If we're cut off from ourselves and from being and from each other and from the light and from well-being and from reality, we're going to show the symptoms here. What would it be like if we humans can have our politics here, our love life here, our sex life here, intimacy here, raise our children here, educate each other here, live together in sacred space on earth here? What would my body be like? What would my mind and my psyche be like? What would be the symptoms I experience if I learn to rehabilitate myself and drop this vice and come into virtue and come to learn how to live in the source code? And it's not out of bounds. It's accessible to all people. Buddha was not trying to teach mindfulness Buddha space for a few elite people. It's for everybody. Stop the suffering. Jesus was not saying a few of you come to the Christ. You can't believe in the Christ. Christ is not here. The Christ is here. And belief is here. You can't believing in Jesus here is not believing. When you're in the deep awakened mind space, the Christ space, to believe is to be. To believe is to zone. To believe is to Christ. And that's believing in the Christ. It's not belief. So belief cannot get you there. Knowledge, here. Information cannot get you to transinformation. The symptoms we're facing here, when we take source science, medical science, and translocate, when we take the symptoms and translocate them into the source medical vision, the symptoms are going to appear differently. So that in my personal life, when I'm feeling an emptiness and I'm facing issues that have been called nihilism, it doesn't make sense. The violence around me, the clash of worlds, the ideology, the terrorism, the clique, the bullying, all of the kinds of, the way people are slashing each other with their narratives and stories, it's awful when you're living here. And so to be distressed, stressed and distress, to have distress, existential distress, to feel that and our great teachers across the planet, our great philosophers are calling out different names for existential despair and angst and facing death and dying, which is an ontological issue. Death is an ontological phenomenon. And if we understand death here in this motherboard, cut off from life, maybe if we understood source life, we might see death, the double bracket death, in a different way. And it might be the most powerful medicine for the fear of death. As the end of my life and my being. My being is over. I'm terminal. And to be haunted by that all your life, you're going to feel it. We're going to feel it. We all feel it. So the symptoms that we have been diagnosing within this motherboard, when seen in the motherboard of the source science and translocated into that space and being seen as effects of being cut off, our symptoms of disorders, our existential disorders, our living disorders across our culture, our whole culture can be ill. My society, my civilization, my culture can be ill because it's using a motherboard that's desourced. Whatever is desourced is ontologically ill. It's ill-being. And happiness and flourishing is well-being. And well-being, you can't fake it. You've got to come into the awakened space and let go of the dominance and being colonized by this motherboard. So what we need to see is any phenomenon here. If I put the pen, as I've done this thought experiment, meditative experiment earlier, that this is a pen. I can talk about the pen. I identify the pen. This is a pen. The pen is black. The pen is for writing. The pen is in my hand. That's all the information about the pen. That's a phenomenon. The pen is, so phenomena is here, but what about the phenomena here? What if I open up to see this pen as a sacred, not an object in the box, an it, but a presence? I witness the pen, and the pen and I are in interflow, or the work of art here, or my lover here. It's not that the lover is here as an it. This is I and this is it. It's an object, and we objectify. And when we objectify, we dehumanize. And when we dehumanize, it breeds violence, because it is violent. The technology itself carries a violence by objectifying and naming and making a unit and Lego blocks of life and cultures and religions and how we read scripture from here. So phenomena, the word phenomena means what appears. All the events around me are going on here. But I'm suggesting that that's because of this lens. But what about if you go into the source space? When we're starting to zone, if this pen were found on Mars, and we viewed it and picked it up from here on Mars, we would begin to see the pen in a different light, with different lenses. Wow, that's huge. That's headline news. This pen was found on Mars. That means there's alien intelligence in the universe. Writing, word, logos, logic, civilization. All of that is encoded in the pen. So every word here in the single bracket, when you put it in the double bracket space, it expands with Unum power. That's huge. So it's phenomena here, but there's phenomena here. When you're doing yoga and your yoga body opens up, your body is empirical. So there's empirical in the box and empirical science here. Unum science is empirical. When we're zoning in the high space, we were experiencing. That's empirical. So empirical in the box is not the only empirical in town. So empirical science, source science, is doing empirical. So when we start to flourish in the zone and cross into the Buddha space, the Christ space, our life changes. We experience it. That's empirical. It's empirical science. So there's phenomena here in the limited space of being cut off under this technology. But if you can go into the open space of a double bracket lens of reason, then everything opens up from X to X. So that's a lot to cover. I'd like to change the page. We went through this experiment before. These are so messy, it's so quick. And we saw in this experiment, if you deny the double bracket space, it solves, and you start out just with this, that you go through different stages to go from this picture where the double bracket is encased within the single bracket here, to the case where the single bracket is seen within the double brackets. That's a 3,000-year evolution to where we are going now. That single bracket technology is funded by and surrounded by the double bracket. So it's a relief just to turn a new leaf, start life over. And I'd like to conclude this meditation. We've gone on a while and I don't like to keep you too long. I did already, and I urged you several times that please don't hesitate to pause. Please don't run away and pause forever, but take a break overnight sometimes, because this is so much I'm bringing in such a compressed time, and I'm trying to be gentle and consider, your presence and willingness to go on this journey ever deeper. But so if we just turn a fresh leaf, and I'd like to end on this thought, because in the next 2 meditations, or perhaps 3, this is a 22nd meditation. Imagine we've done 22 meditations deeper and deeper into source life, to get the code and to look at life from the source code, from source science, from Unum science. And I'm suggesting that this has not been done before. This is a new adventure at the frontier of research and science and spirituality and culture. So turn a new leaf and leave that behind for a moment and realize that this is reality. This is being. This is the infinite field. We could call it Yahweh, we could call it Allah, we could call it Om, we call it Tao, Brahman, the infinite field, infinite being, whatever name we want to use. We don't have to use God words, but the infinite, and that's the double brackets, means you're in the infinite space. What does that mean? It means Unum Pluribus. Just focus on that for a moment. Unum Pluribus means the infinite force, scientifically, is infinite unity. It can't be broken apart. Infinite connectivity. Infinite unum. Unum is infinite connectivity. And because of its very being infinite, it's infinitely diverse. All diversity is held in the unum. So that's unum pluribus. It's one word. Unum pluribus. Pluribus, unum pluribus, same word. That has not been seen. That reality is an infinite field, or Yahweh is infinite, or Allah is infinite, or Om or Tao or Brahman is infinite. It's a basic science. Infinite is infinitely one. That means plurality and multiplicity are unified in the unum. And that's unum pluribus. And that's what the double bracket space technology is. And what that means is that the infinite is infinitely present. It's presence. That has not been seen. We can't push the infinite away, or God is transcendent and we're in the created world and God is over. That's baby stuff. That's baby ontology, not science. Source science is for real. Infinite is infinitely here and every. That's why when geniuses like Blake, the poet, says there's infinity in a grain of sand. And eternity in an hour. Any point in the field is going to be connected with the infinite. And the infinite is in every point. You can't break it down. You can't cut it off. It's everywhere in the infinite. This is, if you want to say, what's the ground floor of reality? This is it. But what we've been seeing is that as in our human journey, as we evolve and learn how to use word power and put the pieces together like subject and predicate, Socrates is wise, the paper is white, the pen is black, I am a man, and so forth. We got information, and then you realize here is the thinker, and here is the space between the thinker and what we thought. This is an object of thought, an experience, and this is where my experience goes. And all of our languages are going on here. All of our cultures, all of our language are using this technology. And that's when we begin to realize, when our teachers are saying, don't get stuck here, and begin to point us to a deeper space, to make a crossing into the I other, the infinite connection between the I and whatever. Not the disconnection between the I, the I here, single bracket, and the object. The subject here and the object there. And language is picturing the world, and the world is out there, and it begins to break. We've been through that. I don't want to make this too messy. So that's when we become aware, let's use this color here, of a single bracket technology. That's the motherboard that's generating this technology. This mind operating process allows the thinker to have thoughts and experiences and phenomena and worldviews, and have to have an identity and a story. All our stories are coming out of here. But it could never be without, nothing can happen without the source. So the source pervades every moment. But here's the point, that any word in this space, any double bracket, any single bracket, then single bracket marks language, thought, reality, or anything here. So any single bracket, say I, and I here, I am. How do you go from single bracket I to double bracket I am? And what we saw before, and I'd like to do it again, is that this is a much more accurate picture, that every I is surrounded by I am. Because remember, I am, the double bracket is making all of this possible. This couldn't happen without the double bracket infinite force. The infinite force is holding all this together. So your double bracket self is not far away, it's right with you. I hope you're following this. We're going to bring this together, and next time we'll go deeper. That every word here, X, single bracket, can be transformed into x, double bracket. Every x is x. And the way we write that, I hope you can see this, every x is x. That means the double bracket meaning is already implanted and encoding with any word. Any word here can be upgraded. So how did we get this? Once you start using this technology, that's where the cutoff zone is. This technology creates a barrier to access to the infinite flow. We've just recreated, very briefly, the hologram of our human condition. That we are using language and making our cultures and our worlds. We realize that there's a technology that we're using and we haven't seen this. This has not been seen, and it cuts us off, and that's not been understood sufficient, even though our great teachers were calling it out for centuries. But we continue to live in here. And it's a vast space of great diversity. And there's no end to how many alternative stories and narratives and paradigm shifts and memes and codes we can come up with to present our different worldviews in this space. But we're still cut off with a mind operating process that is causing us to be desourced and not coming to flourishing in the more awakened space. So the main meditation I wanted to suggest is that if single bracket, every word here, please think about this deeply and begin to do meditative exercises. Whatever language you're speaking, whatever worldview, whatever science, whatever discipline, whatever narrative, whatever scripture, if you use the word God, single bracket, what would God in the double bracket be? If you're using Jesus in the single bracket, what would Jesus double bracket be? If you're using I in the single bracket, what would I am be? If you're using time in the single bracket, what would time be? Every word, every X is X. That's what this holographic visual, X is X. X is X. For every word. So if I say I, single bracket, I am. But the I am is already with you. So why can't I feel it? That's a journey to well-being. We're blocked by something. What is it? How do we go from single bracket America to double bracket civic America here? How do we go from 1776 read in this code and 1776 understood here? What would that be like? What if the double bracket code is how we decode 1776 and 1776, one nation, under God, indivisible, that kind of talk. Pluribus unum, that kind of talk. Are we getting 1776? I'm using an example. Next meditation we'll go into this in greater depth. But just to collect ourselves as we part at the end of 22. The headline points we're making in meditative thinking and meditative speaking, which is what I'm seeking to model with us together, is that to be desourced is to suffer medically. And it is an ontological ailment. And we need to re-look at our symptoms across our culture at all levels, in our personal lives, in our interpersonal lives, in our religious lives, in our political lives, in our economic lives, in our educational lives. Are we desourced? Is our reason broken? Is our language scattered? Is our words and our experience and our narratives broken in that kind of babble, ontological babble? And what would it take to really cross into the awakened, integral, holistic source code that has being pioneered for over 3,000 years? And we're still not getting it. We're still not calling it out because we're still laboring under the single bracket smother board. So in our next meditation, number 23, let's take this all the way. Let's go deeply. Let's look at What happens? How do I understand my own ailments in my life? I have addictions, I have attachments, I have codependent relations, I'm at odds with my significant others, with my children, let us say, or even if we're getting along well, are we slashing each other with our minds and are not recognizing it? How is my political life going? How is my economic? Am I overly consumerism and trying to fill my existential ontological illness and emptiness with stuff, or with more recognition, with approval, with money? How do I get my existential security? If I'm feeling dislodged and insecure, existential insecurity, and not feeling safe, but safety is here in the zone, right? How do I really get safety and security? Ontological safety. And so on. So we're going to go into that in every aspect of our culture. I don't want to break it apart. I don't want to just look at the personal and then separate that from the interpersonal and separate that from the political and from the cultural breakdowns and meltdowns and the educational, institutional breakdowns we have. They're all interconnected. They're all desourced. So one plays off the other in the illness here. So as an exercise for next time, start going from, if you're speaking English, let us say, English here, do you know double bracket English? Any word here, single bracket, can you do an exercise to get the double bracket meaning? Can you go from time to time? From single bracket Jesus, what would double bracket Jesus be like? What would double bracket God be like? If I'm doing yoga, what would double bracket yoga be like? If I'm a scientist, can I go to do a deeper form of science to encounter reality more deeply with a more powerful lens, a holoscopic lens, which is what the double bracket Unum lens is. And for scientists, we treasure technologies to get the microscope and the telescope, and how about the holoscope of the mind? So good science and good scientists are willing to check the mind operating process. Have we done that as scientists? To say, have we been using and developing our science, great as it is, and it is great, and all of our technologies, have we been laboring under a smotherboard that's blocking me from a deeper access to rational power and brain power and mind power and word power and vision power and empirical power to encounter reality more deeply, non-local, butterfly effect, processing the depth of infinite density of black holes. How can I get a better science? Can I understand human disorders and human suffering and medical issues more deeply? Could I look more deeply into a person who is in the crisis of suicide or deep addiction or broken relationships or broken marriage here or marriage there? So try that experiment with me as you begin to go from English to English. We speak English, we speak Spanish, we speak French, we speak Swahili, we speak German. Whatever language you're speaking, can you speak that language in the double bracket? Take any word and go to the deeper source word. Please practice that. That's a meditative exercise. And it's astounding what begins to come out of that. Can you go from I to I am? Who am I in the zone, in the double bracket space? That's our journey to well-being. So next meditation, number 23. Please come back and just have a time to metabolize and absorb the amount of flood you're getting from this in terms of source science and source medical and medical ontology. Please remember those words. Ontological ailment, from being desourced. That's one of the headline points we're getting at. So, and next time we're going to go more deeply into these various broken symptoms in our political life, in our personal life, in our family life, in our education, in our economic life, in our religious practice. What would religious life be in the double brackets? Think of those questions. It's amazing. And it's a matter of life and death. Because if our great teachers are correct, life here, as much as we have and can Google information here, this is the Google space. But you can't Google here. And as much as life here, because if life is cut off from life and flourishing, we're going to feel it. Could we upgrade our life? That's the question. Can we not download the higher intelligence and reality and being to where we are, but upscript. That's been the call of our teachers. Don't download, but upscript into the zone. And please do some exercises. Start doing your yoga. That's deep yoga. That's Christ. That's Moses. That's Buddha. That's Kabbalah. That is Rumi. All of our great. Take whatever book you're reading, whatever bestseller that speaks to you, that is your favorite. Try to read it in double brackets. If you're moved by the power of now, single bracket now is not double bracket now. Double bracket now is the power. If you're talking about going to love, love in the box is not love in the zone. Double bracket love. How can you conduct an experiment to go from single bracket love to double bracket love? From single bracket sex to double bracket sex. From single bracket politics to double bracket dialogue. From monologue to dialogue. And so on. So that rehabilitation of our consciousness of English to English. I playfully say with my students from English to Zenglish, Zen English. If you could speak Zen English, then every aspect of your life will be upgraded when you speak Zenglish. So everyone, whatever language you're speaking, try to practice Zenglish, right? And look around the world with fresh eyes. It's a joy. It's liberating. It's rehabilitation of the mind and rehabilitation of life. And that's source medicine. Thank you so much for staying with us.